What happens when an ordinary restaurant owner becomes the addiction and irresistible force of the most ruthless crime lord in Seoul, South Korea? For Amaka, a single moment of courage against Kwan-soo, the merciless Mafia kingpin, transformed her entire existence. She was meant to disappear that night, erased like countless others who dared challenge him. Instead, she became the one woman he refused to release, to bow, to cower or succumb to his whims and caprices. Amaka never expected her small West African eatery tucked between towering apartment complexes in Seoul would collide with the path of Kwan-soo, the shadowy ruler of the city's underworld. Loving such a man meant gambling with her life. Opposing him meant signing her death warrant. Yet when passion and defiance collide, survival becomes a dangerous game played by a heart that refuses to surrender. Who will that be? Let's find out in the story. The evening thrummed with energy as Seoul's nightlife pulsed around them. Electric blues and hot pinks bled across the wet streets, painting everything in shifting neon. Inside Amaka's kitchen, warmth flooded from every corner. The rich scent of jollof rice, perfectly charred goat meat, and West African spices hung thick in the air, unfamiliar to most Korean palates, but intoxicating to those who entered her sanctuary. Amaka moved with practiced grace, her dark skin gleaming under the kitchen lights as she plated another round of crispy cassava fries. Her thick hair was wrapped intricately, a few braids framing her focused face. She wasn't merely the proprietor of this establishment, she was its soul. Every dish that left her kitchen carried her fingerprints, her pride, her dreams. She had sacrificed everything to make this restaurant real. Her server, Kdrama, rushed through the kitchen doors looking flustered. "The corner booth is requesting more wine," she announced nervously, her eyes darting toward the dining area. Amaka looked up from her work. In that instant, the atmosphere transformed entirely. A procession of men in tailored black suits swept through the entrance, their presence immediately draining the restaurant of its casual warmth. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Forks paused. The customers instinctively made themselves smaller, less visible. The man leading them didn't merely enter a room, he dominated it. Broad across the shoulders, his features carved sharp and precise, his jet black hair styled with military exactness. His suit appeared custom-made to his frame alone. Amaka had lived long enough in this city to recognize the name attached to that face, even though she'd never seen it in person until now. Kwan-soo, the underground emperor, the man whose whispered name caused entire families to vanish, the one they said had never shown mercy and never would. Her pulse accelerated, but she kept her posture straight, her expression neutral. This remained her space. Her rules applied here. She approached their table, order pad in hand, her voice composed and professional. "Good evening. Welcome to Amaka's table." Kwan-soo's gaze rose slowly, deliberately, to meet hers. His eyes were like black ice, piercing yet hollow, capable of dissecting a person's soul in seconds. He said nothing. Instead, he raised one hand and gestured forward with a single finger. She set down the menus before him. "This evening we're featuring—" "I'll take whatever you believe deserves my attention," Kwan-soo interrupted, his tone carrying the weight of absolute command. Not a request, not a suggestion, a demand wrapped in silk. Amaka's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She nodded, masked her irritation behind professionalism, and returned to the kitchen. Her hands prepared the food with muscle memory while her mind spiraled. Why had he chosen her restaurant? Why tonight? When she delivered the plates, fragrant jollof rice, succulent grilled goat, perfectly fried plantains, Kwan-soo examined them with an unreadable expression. He took measured bites, each movement precise, deliberate, as though conducting an inspection rather than eating. The entire dining room watched in suspended silence. Then, without warning, he shoved the plate away. It crashed to the ground, splattering red sauce across white tile. Plates shattered. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the restaurant. "Unworthy," he announced to the vacuum of sound. "Your food couldn't impress a starving street dog." Gasps rippled through the room. Kyoma's hand flew to her mouth. Other diners stared at their own plates as though they'd become toxic. This was the expected script. You absorbed the insult, swallowed your pride, and thanked the universe for surviving another day. Most people followed this unwritten law without hesitation. Amaka didn't. She walked forward, her shoes crunching deliberately over ceramic fragments. She positioned herself at the edge of his table, her chin elevated, her posture unbending. "You're paying for that meal," she stated, her voice steady as stone. Kwan-soo's head tilted slowly. His eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "Excuse me? You consumed the food. You ruined the plate. You settle the bill." Amaka's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "You don't get to destroy my establishment and walk away like you own this place." One of his associates stood abruptly, fury twisting his face. "Listen here, woman. Sit," Kwan-soo commanded, his voice thin and lethal. The man dropped back into his seat instantly, trembling. Kwan-soo rose, his frame towering over her. His presence became suffocating, a hurricane in human form. He leaned until his face was inches from hers, close enough that she perceived the thin scar traversing his jawline. "You've got some nerve," he murmured, his breath warm against her face. But nerve burns away when met with true power. Amaka's heartbeat thundered, but she refused to flinch. Her words emerged sharp and cutting. "And power corrodes when faced with resistance. Don't test me, Kwan-soo." The use of his full name caused the room to gasp collectively. Nobody ever spoke his name aloud. It was forbidden, dangerous, blasphemous. For the briefest moment, surprise flickered across his face. His lips curved into something resembling a smirk, mixed with disbelief. "You really did just," he started. "I did." Her dark eyes remained unflinching. She retrieved the bill folder from the counter, scribbled the total with aggressive strokes, and placed it between them on the table. "That comes to 45,001. Cash or card." The room turned into a tomb. His men stiffened, anticipating carnage. Was she genuinely seeking death? Had she developed a death wish? Kwan-soo studied her for an extended moment, his face revealing nothing, but his eyes burned with something unprecedented. Not merely rage, not simple arrogance, but something entirely different, something darker and more consuming. He didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, he stepped closer still, near enough that she caught the scent of sandalwood and cigarette smoke clinging to his clothes. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, dangerous as a serpent's hiss. "You'll answer for this before long." Then he turned and departed, his entourage moving like shadows in his wake. The door chimed as it closed, an absurdly cheerful sound in the suffocating silence. The moment his presence vanished, the restaurant erupted into frantic whispers and alarmed murmurs. Everyone spoke at once, their voices overlapping in panic and disbelief. Kdrama rushed to Amaka's side, trembling visibly. "Madam, what have you done?" she whispered desperately. Amaka knelt and began collecting broken porcelain pieces, placing them methodically in the trash. Her movements remained calm, though internally she felt unraveled. "What needed doing?" she said simply. Yet as she disposed of the fragments, a weight settled into her chest. Tonight had shifted something fundamental. She had challenged a king in his territory, and men like Kwan-soo never forgave such transgression. Morning arrived with unwelcome clarity. Amaka's restaurant felt diminished somehow, as though Kwan-soo's presence had drained something essential from the space. The usual vibrant hum of loyal patrons had transformed into sparse, nervous quiet. Amaka arranged fresh jollof into serving bowls, but customers didn't queue for them. Kdrama fidgeted constantly at the register, glancing toward the entrance with unconcealed anxiety. "Do you think he'll return?" Kdrama finally asked, her voice quivering. Amaka paused, wiping her hands clean. She hadn't experienced restful sleep the previous night. Kwan-soo's dark eyes had invaded her dreams. His voice, menacing yet somehow intrigued, still echoed through her consciousness. The promise of retaliation hung over her like an executioner's blade. She straightened her shoulders deliberately. "If he does come back, I'll still be standing." Kdrama looked at her as though she'd announced plans to fly. "People vanish after standing up to him, sister. Do you want to disappear?" Amaka attempted a confident smile. "I traveled too far to disappear now." But doubt gnawed at her regardless. She'd witnessed enough in this city to understand that power like Kwan-soo's wasn't theatrical. It was absolute, invisible, capable of dismantling someone's existence without leaving a trace. Within the week, her worst fears materialized. The disruptions started with suppliers. Her primary grain distributor, the sole merchant trusted with her standards, called stammering apologies across the phone line. "I'm deeply sorry, but we cannot continue servicing your location," the man said, his voice trembling. "Why?" Amaka pressed, gripping the phone harder. "We've worked together for 3 years without issue." Silence stretched painfully before he sighed. "Directives from above. Please don't contact us again." The line went dead. 2 additional suppliers withdrew by afternoon. By evening, even the company providing her packaging materials canceled their contract. Amaka stood alone in her kitchen that night, hands gripping the counter edge until her knuckles blanched. The shelves that had overflowed yesterday now appeared barren. The message was unmistakable. Kwan-soo. He hadn't returned to threaten her verbally or destroy her belongings. His method was far more calculated. His silence proved deadlier than any outburst. His reach extended further than violence. When she closed the restaurant and stepped outside, a black sedan idled across the street, tinted windows concealing whoever watched from within. She felt their eyes penetrating the darkness, tracking her movements. She kept her chin high regardless, and walked home without accelerating her pace. Days accumulated like dust. Her business withered systematically. The regulars abandoned her with flimsy excuses about their busy schedules. Everyone understood the reality, though. Nobody willingly attracted Kwan-soo's attention. Still, Amaka refused capitulation. She cooked each morning with dwindling ingredients. She wiped tables each evening, even when only 2 or 3 patrons had occupied seats. And every single night, the black car appeared across the street, patient and ominous. One evening after locking up, Amaka pivoted to find a man in a tailored black suit blocking her path. She stumbled backward, her heart leaping violently into her throat. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man bowed slightly. "A representative. My employer requests your presence." Her fists clenched. "And what if I refuse?" "Then we remain here." The man replied without emotion. "Though my employer prefers punctuality." Amaka inhaled deeply, her chest weighted with dread, yet she refused to be dragged away like livestock. "Tell your employer that if he wants an audience with me, he can request it properly. He can come here himself." The man's eyes flickered briefly, perhaps with surprise, before he bowed again and retreated into the waiting automobile. Amaka stood alone against the night wind, her legs trembling beneath her, even as her spirit burned defiantly. The retaliation escalated dramatically. She arrived one afternoon to discover her restaurant windows shattered into countless fragments. Tables lay overturned. Someone had spray-painted crude symbols across her walls in crimson paint, symbols that belonged to Kwan-soo's world, symbols that screamed possession and warning. Kdrama collapsed into sobs upon seeing the destruction. "We have to stop, sister. We have to leave. This isn't worth dying for." Amaka stood amid the wreckage, her fists shaking at her sides. Despair clawed at her, threatening to consume her. But then her mother's voice echoed through her memory, a voice that had guided her through every hardship. "Stand tall, Amaka. The world respects only those who refuse to break." With steady hands, she retrieved a broom. "We clean this tonight. We open tomorrow, as always." Kdrama stared as though her employer had lost her mind. Perhaps she had, yet surrender meant Kwan-soo had won. Amaka hadn't journeyed across an ocean to lose. That night, as she scrubbed the last crimson marks from her walls, the door opened soundlessly. The click of expensive shoes against wood made her freeze completely. Slowly, she turned. There he stood, Kwan-soo, not accompanied by guards this time. Alone, his silhouette framed by streetlight, appearing as though he owned the very atmosphere surrounding him. He stepped inside, his shadow stretching impossibly long across the floor. His suit remained immaculate, his presence overwhelming. Amaka straightened, gripping her cleaning cloth as though it offered protection. "Come to verify I've surrendered yet?" Kwan-soo's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Not yet." Fascinating. His gaze traveled across the partially cleaned walls, the broken glass still piled in corners. Then his eyes returned to hers, sharp as blades, yet searching for something unspoken. "You could have made this simple," he said quietly. "All you needed was submission, a bowed head. Instead," he gestured vaguely at the devastation, "you fight." Amaka's chest rose and fell with controlled breathing. "Because this establishment is mine. Because I refuse to surrender what I've built to anyone, regardless of their power." Kwan-soo moved closer. The air seemed to crystallize around him, heavy with unspoken tension. His eyes locked onto hers, unreadable yet profoundly searching. "You're not afraid of me," he murmured. Amaka's throat constricted, her mouth suddenly dry. Fear absolutely consumed her internally, yet she would never permit it to show. "Perhaps I am terrified, yet I won't allow that fear to dictate my choices." Silence extended between them, stretching impossibly long. Only the city's distant hum occupied the space. Then, unexpectedly, Kwan-soo laughed, low, dark, and genuine. The sound sent shivers cascading down her spine. "Either you're incredibly brave," he said, "or catastrophically foolish." He leaned forward slightly, close enough that his cologne enveloped her, sandalwood, smoke, and something indefinably him. His voice became a dangerous whisper. "And I honestly cannot determine which attracts me more." With that, he turned and departed, the door closing softly behind him. Amaka remained frozen, her heart hammering erratically. She'd anticipated violence, destruction, possibly death. But what she'd witnessed in his eyes unsettled her far more profoundly. Because in that charged instant, she couldn't determine whether Kwan-soo intended to destroy her or whether he had simply made her his newest fascination. The night after Kwan-soo's unexpected visit, Amaka lay awake in bed, unable to escape the memory of his expression. His smirk burned in her consciousness. His voice, intriguing yet dangerous, echoed through her thoughts. The words played repeatedly. "And I honestly cannot determine which attracts me more." She shook her head forcefully, pushing his image away. She couldn't permit herself to think about him that way. He represented destruction wrapped in elegance, a predator wearing designer clothes. She'd survived in Seoul by maintaining low visibility and working relentlessly, not by entangling herself with dangerous criminals. Yet something fundamental had shifted. She'd witnessed genuine interest igniting in his expression, something entirely disconnected from fury and wholly connected to fascination. And Kwan-soo's fascination constituted the greatest threat she'd encountered. When she reopened her restaurant, she noticed the changes immediately. Fresh faces appeared among her clientele, people who didn't naturally fit the demographic of her establishment. Their eyes lingered excessively long. Their questions about her dishes felt rehearsed and mechanical. They paid exclusively in cash, left substantial tips, consumed almost nothing, and departed. Observers stationed by Kwan-soo, collecting information, reporting her movements. Kiyoma noticed as well. "Sister, those people frighten me," she whispered while clearing plates. "The way they watch you, it's wrong." Amaka offered a tight smile she didn't genuinely feel. They'll develop other interests eventually. Internally, she knew better. That evening, while walking toward home, Amaka realized she was being followed deliberately. Footsteps matched hers through narrow alleyways between apartment complexes. She stopped. The footsteps ceased simultaneously. Her pulse quickened. She spun around. Kwan-soo stood there, yet transformed. Instead of his customary suit, he wore a simple black jacket, his hair falling casually across his forehead. His presence remained equally suffocating regardless. He leaned against the brick wall as though he'd been waiting eternally. Amaka's voice emerged, sharper than intended. "Are you pursuing me now?" His lips curved faintly. Pursuing represents such unflattering terminology. I prefer the word observing. "Observing?" she repeated incredulously. He pushed away from the wall, movements fluid and predatory. "You consume my thoughts," he said simply. Amaka stiffened. "I never requested your attention." "That's precisely the difficulty with intensity," Kwan-soo murmured, stepping nearer. It doesn't wait for permission. It simply ignites, and everyone nearby experiences the warmth, regardless of their preferences. Her breath caught, but she forced herself to stand firmly. If you've come to threaten me again, it won't function. Threaten? His voice contained velvet qualities, though steel resided underneath. No, Amaka. If I genuinely wanted to threaten you, you wouldn't currently be standing here conversing with me. Her heart accelerated, but she maintained eye contact. Then what's your objective? His gaze moved across her face methodically, as though deciphering an ancient text. Truthfully, he said quietly, I remain uncertain. The answer terrified her more profoundly than any explicit threat could have. Over the subsequent week, his presence became inescapable. Everywhere her feet carried her, she felt him or his representatives. At the marketplace, a man in a black coat observed from across vegetable stalls. On the subway, eyes burned into her until she turned, catching only a disappearing shadow. Late at night, when she gazed from her kitchen window, she swore she perceived him beneath the streetlight, smoking cigarettes, watching her restaurant with unwavering focus. He never entered. He never communicated. He merely observed. Strangely, that silence troubled her far more than direct confrontation would have. Her customer base continued deteriorating. Rumors spread rapidly. Some claimed Kwan-soo protected her. Others suggested she'd offended him. Regardless, ordinary citizens steered clear of her establishment. The emptiness didn't devastate her professionally as much as the isolation destroyed her emotionally. One night after closing, she sat alone at a table and buried her face in her hands. Her chest ached with exhaustion, rage, and terror she couldn't permit herself to express openly. Despair doesn't enhance your appearance. Her head snapped up immediately. Kwan-soo materialized in her doorway, his silhouette outlined by exterior street luminescence. He'd entered without warning, as though shadows themselves parted for his passage. Amaka sprang to her feet, hurriedly wiping her face. You again. Indeed. He approached smoothly. Should I have announced myself? Standard individuals generally knock, she said. His smirk deepened. Do I present as ordinary? She exhaled sharply, crossing her arms defensively. Why do you persist in coming here? He contemplated her extended moment, then answered straightforwardly. Because I wanted to. The audacity made her emit a bitter laugh. You demolished my business. You terrorized my employee. Now you appear because you experienced a desire to do so? His expression remained neutral, but his eyes flickered briefly with something exposed, unguarded. You dominate my consciousness, Amaka. Nobody communicates with me the way you do. No one maintains such defiance. Maybe that's because other individuals possess sufficient sense to preserve their existence, she snapped. Silence expanded between them. Then, unexpectedly, Kwan-soo produced genuine laughter. Not cruel this instance, but low, authentic, remarkably warm. Amaka blinked in surprise. She had never heard him laugh sincerely before. The sound unsettled her more deeply than his threats had. Do you comprehend how lengthy the interval has been? He said softly, almost conversing with himself. Since someone dared challenge me directly like that? She clenched her jaw, refusing capitulation to his charm. Perhaps you require individuals providing you truthful perspectives. Kwan-soo's gaze locked intensely onto hers. Then he stepped forward until minimal space separated them, close enough that she perceived his body heat. You burn, Amaka, he said softly. And I... His lips curved into an expression dangerously appealing. I have remained frozen for far too long. Her breathing hitched. For the initial occasion since encountering him, something shifted internally. Not fear, not rage, but something considerably more dangerous. A magnetic pull drawing her toward him. That night following his departure, Amaka remained awake in her restaurant well past midnight. Her thoughts churned chaotically. She should despise him. She should wish nothing to do with him. He represented chaos, destruction, danger incarnate. Yet her fingers trembled remembering how his expression had softened momentarily. how his laughter had sounded like a person rediscovering forgotten capacities for feeling. It terrified her immensely, because she recognized with crushing clarity that Kwan-soo wasn't simply examining her determination anymore. He was gradually drawing her into his world, thread by thread, and she couldn't determine how much resistance remained available to her. Days transformed into weeks. The restaurant operated with renewed energy. Fresh flowers decorated tables. Customers cautiously returned. New patrons discovered her cuisine. Yet, despite the improvements, Amaka remained acutely conscious of his presence, that invisible yet unmistakable attention constantly directed toward her. Sometimes a black automobile waited across the street. Sometimes strangers entered, observed, and departed without ordering anything. She recognized these activities as his unique surveillance method, monitoring without intruding. She repeatedly told herself she hated it. She repeatedly insisted she hated him. But her heart always accelerated when sensing his proximity, betraying her supposed indifference. Nearly midnight arrived when she finally locked her doors. Seoul's winter had arrived, snowflakes descending gently through darkness. She wrapped her scarf tightly and turned toward her lock only to freeze completely. Kwan-soo stood across the street alone, no escorts accompanying him. His black jacket displayed dusting of snow, his jawline appearing pale within the winter luminescence. Their eyes connected. Amaka's heart detonated against her ribs. Her breath created small clouds in the frigid air. "What brings you here, Kwan-soo?" she called, maintaining steadiness despite internal turbulence. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he crossed the street, each step deliberate, snow crunching softly beneath his shoes. Upon reaching her position, he stood sufficiently near that she perceived the tremor in his hand as he extracted something metallic from his jacket pocket. Not a weapon, a velvet box. Amaka's lips parted in shock. "You cannot possibly be serious." "I am entirely serious," Kwan-soo cut in, his voice low yet unshakable. "I have demolished entire organizations for considerably lesser provocations than your actions. You damaged my reputation. You defied my authority. You cursed me directly before witnesses." His voice fractured slightly. "Yet I have never desired anything as desperately as I desire you." Amaka's breath caught. The crime lord, the man feared throughout Korea, descended onto one knee before her, snow settling on his shoulders. The velvet box revealed a simple silver band, uncomplicated, unadorned, absolutely authentic. "I can provide riches," he whispered, eyes burning into hers. "I can grant authority. I can eliminate every individual who ever displays disrespect toward you. None of that matters, though." His voice trembled. "If I cannot possess your heart. So I'm requesting this desperately, Amaka. Don't become my possession. Become my counterpart. Become my queen." The entire universe seemed suspended. City noise faded entirely. Snowflakes hung motionless. Only her heartbeat remained audible. "Kwan-soo," her voice trembled. "Comprehend you what you're requesting. I'm nothing like you. I don't inhabit your universe of weapons and criminality. You inhabit wherever you wish to exist," he responded fiercely, rising to his feet. His eyes blazed with intensity. "If that necessitates dismantling my entire organization to construct your reality, I will execute that task." Tears accumulated in her eyes. She had resisted him, reviled him, opposed him repeatedly. Yet here he stood, selecting her, minimizing himself for her, a man who'd never bowed to anyone. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "What if I decline?" Kwan-soo's expression tightened. "Then I will dedicate the remainder of my existence convincing you that I merit your acceptance." His sincerity shattered her resistance completely. Slowly, Amaka stepped closer. Her fingers reached upward, brushing his ice-cold cheek. He closed his eyes as though her touch contained warmth he'd been craving eternally. "You frighten me, Kwan-soo," she whispered. "You frustrate me profoundly. Yet simultaneously—" She swallowed hard, her tears finally descending. "You make me feel genuinely alive in ways I'd never imagined possible." His eyes opened immediately, searching hers with desperate intensity. Does that mean— Yes, she breathed, but with conditions. Anything, he responded instantly. You must learn to regard me as your equal, she whispered, not as your possession, not as your acquisition, as Amaka, the woman who walks beside you rather than beneath you. Silence stretched briefly, then gradually, Kwan-soo's expression transformed into a genuine smile. Not the cold, mocking smirk she'd encountered repeatedly, but an authentic smile, vulnerable and raw. At your behest, my darling Amaka. He positioned the gold ring on her trembling finger. The metallic surface gleamed beneath falling snowflakes. When he pulled her into his embrace, kissing her with passion that burned more intensely than any flame, Amaka finally comprehended the complete truth. The crime lord had genuinely bowed, not simply to her affection, but to her resilience.